I shut up and leave the floor to our two guests, Catherine, not Catherine, but Pia Majbritt Jensen in the role of Catherine Bergessner, and especially our keynote speaker, Janet McCabe. I shut up, I close also my camera.
Yep. Okay, so we better start now, Janet. Yeah, my name is not Catherine Bergessner, it's Pia Majbritt Jensen, but I'm on Catherine's computer. So it's all good. It is my pleasure to introduce Janet McCabe. Janet is a reader in television and film studies at Birkbeck, University of London. She is editor-in-chief at Critical Studies in Television, which is published by SAGE and is the leading international academic journal for television studies. Her research areas include feminism, feminist cultural theory, and the representational politics of television cultures. More recently, her interests have also extended to include transnational feminism and TV studies, looking at global patterns of representational forms in original scripted TV formats, as well as the audiovisual as a form of practice-led research within television studies. Janet has written extensively on feminism, representational politics, and television cultures, with her work appearing in various edited collections and journals. For example, along with Kim Akers, she was the co-series editor of Reading Contemporary Television. She's also co-edited a number of collections, including something that a lot of collections that many TV scholars will know. For example, TV's Betty Goes Global, Quality TV, and Reading Sex and the City. And the last one has actually even been translated into Korean, Russian, and Japanese, which is quite a feat, I would say. Janet's latest monograph, which is called Disconnected Heroines, Global Femininities, Transnational TV Feminisms, and the Cultural Representational Geopolitics of Women in Brunn, the Bridge, is forthcoming from Bloomsbury Academic. The screen is yours, Janet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pia, and thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And I want to start with my thanks to Sarah for assistance with the registration, as well as Luca, Valentina, and Federico for their patience with the technical matters on Saturday, which took much longer than any of us anticipated. However, they obviously continued, and I do apologise for the late starting. Plus, I'd like to extend my further thanks to the organisers, to Sonia, to Monica, Valentina and Frederica for hosting what remains a very difficult time, and I'm truly honoured to have been invited to speak to conference. So my contribution this afternoon aims to speak to the agenda of DTEC with its transnational epistemological ambition to understand narratives of crime and investigation within print fiction, film and television. Not only to explore how these narratives are produced in culture, but are also read by audiences and situated in culture across Europe and beyond. Wrapped into that intellectual aspiration is a desire to identify key institutional and textual trends within European popular culture since 1989. And it is these very transcultural, transmedia forms produced in that crucible of contested geopolitical change and accelerated transnational circulation, which is under scrutiny here in the DTEC project, to bring, I think, these various objects which we're all discussing into view. So my contribution this afternoon is to insert the question of feminism and feminist cultural theory into the debate. And I do so as a way to think about what feminist theories can bring to the discussion about stories of TV crime in global circulation, as well as what my practice-led research as a feminist scholar of transnational television can add. As a feminist TV scholar working with cultural theory, my keynotes to conference will speak to this epistemological agenda. as I share my current research on contemporary transnational television culture and the geopolitics of female representation in crime TV drama originating from Europe that travels. The purpose of which seeks to advance an encounter informed by feminisms and feminist theory in both TV studies and theory. So this keynote then is about locating the women, making visible that geopolitics. It's about what comes into view when borders shift and disciplinary boundaries alter. But it's also about time and durational experience. It's about time in the consecrating of value and the valuing of women's stories in global circulation across time. Contemporary flows involving the migration of television content and institutions, creativity and economics, media technologies, streaming services and digital platforms has disrupted the old logic of television. But legacy media, like public service broadcasting, has survived, with its legitimacy and its value reimagined, embedded in particular storytelling forms, like the double storytelling, as detailed by Ava Redville, for example. New alliances involving European public service broadcasters with independent production companies producing high-end TV content finds the traditional public service mission reworked with these players and reworks them into players that remain socially and culturally relevant. The politics of women has been caught in the trading and cultural crossfire, entangled in transnationally networked but nationally located media ecologies and that materiality of its specific representational politics. Such issues of female visibility or not are no longer contained within national borders and local domains, but instead tumble into the world, often in permeable, messy, and ambiguous ways, only to take on a different kind of material existence seen through the transnational prism, but at the same time, always nationally rooted and locally situated. I thus consider how feminisms working across borders may provide interdisciplinary, intersectional and cross-discipline methodologies best able to locate and make sense of the cultural geopolitics of women being in the television world. But in making sense of that entanglement, I argue for how value is being created, a value for women's stories made in cross-border encounters, value for its representational forms in global circulation, and the value for television culture, or what I would call the restricted field of cultural TV production. How I will structure this keynote is through a triptych of audio-visual essays I made with Catherine Grant in 2008. And I apologize immediately to those who have already seen this work, as I had intended to produce some new ones, but we've had the small matter of the pandemic here in the UK, which has affected my ability to produce any new work. Still, in revisiting the old will not only allow me to structure my thesis this afternoon, but to reconsider the audiovisual essay as a material object in time. To replay it will help me rethink its values, especially as I'm increasingly drawn to questions of time and temporality, of durational experience with my own theoretical work around the value chain of transnational television culture and the geopolitics of women entangled within it. Such an intervention is carried out and deeply rooted in a specific case study of the original high concept scripted TV format known as The Bridge, comprising of the Swedish-Danish co-produced series Brunn in 2011 to 18, and with the two adaptations, the US-Mexican The Bridge and the French-UK The Tunnel. Sadly, I can't include, or I haven't included the Estonian Russian Most, or the Singapore Malay, the Bridge, or the Austrian German De Pass. And these are works I discuss elsewhere, but sadly, they haven't quite made the cut here this afternoon. Still, I'm offering my thesis through this audiovisual practice-led research as a way to structure my thinking. And it's structured in three parts, related firstly to feminisms in the world, secondly to locational feminism. For the brevity of this paper, I'm just focusing on this particular strand of my work. And thirdly, and in conclusion, I want to put forward the case for a new way of feminist thinking and how this materialist approach can add to our thinking about the transnational value chain in television. I must reiterate, but these audiovisual essays are not standalone objects, but they are works in critical dialogue with my theoretical work in cultural theory, feminism, and contemporary television. So let's start then with the first essay, Flow Cut. And I start with the audacious opening moments when the body on the border splits, a moment that's first seen in the Danish-Swedish co-production of Brön, then repeated first in the scripted reiteration at the US-Mexican border in The Bridge in 2013, and then the subterranean adaptation inside the Eurotunnel linking France with the UK in the tunnel in 2003 as well, only for me to reassemble them all in 2018. We are going to see, hopefully, this audio-visual essay, but I must include a warning and say that this essay contains gruesome images of body mutilation. I confess that I am now immune to the body politics of TV prosthetics and post-production, but it is a shock, and it is a shocking scene. So could we now see the first film, please?
We really hope so. Let's see. We are launching it. No, sorry.
Hi.
Yeah, could you repeat us the title of your talk? To which one we need to show now?
Flow Cuts is the first one.
Flow Cut. Yes. Yeah. Can you see it?
We can go and snuggle under our duvets.
No, but
Ik kan het al hebben nu.
Should go and give them their details.
Echo starters across the room, trembling noises that come too soon. Spatial movement which seems to near, resonating a mask of fear. Hollow talking, hollow girl. Thoughts set off on the road of pain. Never said it was good, never said it was neat. us back to the beginning.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, wait a second. You need to share again your slides.
Okay,
Okay.
so encountering a dead, often sexually violated female corpse, as Charlotte Brunson will tell us, is nothing new. In fact, it's a common trope of the crime formula with a very long generic history on television, but also within film and in literature. Yet in these transnational in-between spaces of somewhere and anywhere, situated at a national border where local jurisdictions collide with otherness, is encountered and cross-border cooperation unavoidable. It is a female fatality with a body that quite literally splits in two before our very eyes, that conjures this imaginary transnational television space into being. She is what happens at the border. The female corpse splitting in two before our eyes translates into an affecting bodily encounter deliberately designed to despoil the well-drawn national map of the local TV crime beat. Effect initiates the story and introduces novelty into the genre, negotiating a very congested television market. As a metaphor for a contemporary cross-border body politics, the desecrated female body also speaks ferociously and intensely to the transnational ambition of the scripted format idea behind The Bridge as a new kind of TV crime series fit for travel, a geopolitical, bilateral, bilingual thriller. The task ahead becomes how to speak differently, adopting a different tone, gesture within this entangled geopolitical web of local global thinking, which leads me to meditate on the scripted TV format designed as a palimpsest. Etched into its very material condition, reveals the interconnecting and intersectional yet discrete textual journeys, comprising an original high concept idea recycled and reused somewhere in the world. A scripted format scraped and repurposed for economic and cultural reasons, a game of citations, adaptations, and remakes. In the very structures of material thinking at work in a scripted TV format as palimpsest are also evidence of the circulatory norms of cultural worth and value, and legitimacy bestowed within an endless cycle of consecration. Here I'm drawn to the work of Pierre Bourdieu with his theory of the cultural field, which situates creative works within the social conditions of their production, circulation, and consumption. Exploring notions of cultural and symbolic capital as defined by Bourdieu adds to the debates about transnational value chains within television, which have been initiated by Jean Chalabi with his integrated value chain model for the TV format. It adds to what Sue Turnbull and Marianne McCutcheons have said with their economic model, as well as the cultural production and reception work generated by the Wide Danish TV Travel project at Aarhus, which in turn is asking new questions of the transnational value chain, and something I'm sure Pia and I will discuss after this presentation. Returning though to the audiovisual essay, in its material encounter with the text is the announcement of the female detective, or what I call the disconnected heroine. While again rooted in a longer generic history in literature, film, and television, the emergence of the complicated female protagonist has proved a resilient global traveller in the last 10 years. Here in 2011, the socially awkward Saga Noran, played by Sophie Helene, scaled up in the world, locating fans beyond the Nordic territories. But also the asocial anti-heroine with a borderline personality translated into other territories, reimagined as the US detective Sonia Cross, played by Diana Kruger in the US-Mexican The Bridge, and French commander Alicia Weissman, played by Clemency Posey in The Tunnel. In looking at how Saga and her crime-fighting sisters come into being in precise places and at certain times is, I claim, to understand a specific cultural TV production in the world. What these explicit expressions share is what Bourdieu calls, quote, a system of common references, a common framework. And situated in relation to each other, they cannot escape its logic. Simply stated, this is about cultural legitimacy and how Saga stories, crime stories involving women, investigations by a woman, tales about women, come to be known as important television through cycles of consecration, as her narrative and narrational voice carries through various networks and across multiple platforms, broadcast, cable, and satellite and internet distributed television. This is about how a preference for her story is legitimized in the world, a belief in it. The task becomes searching out these acts of consecration in the field, acts that ensure her stories are valued, her stories recognized as valuable pieces of television property, stories carrying value, and how that value accumulates over time, which in turn allows a series centering on a disconnected heroine to travel, to circulate in the world and take root elsewhere. What I'm arguing here is that there is no Saga Noran in the world without the transnational chain of material and symbolic value, and there is no value chain without Saga Noran. But I'm getting ahead of myself. And I start now by asking how fit for purpose is feminism as a theoretical traveling partner to help in my thinking. Disclosing the unwritten and often unconscious rules structuring the very epistemology of feminism scaled up in the world has proved the vital contribution of feminist scholarship of late, including, for example, the work of Ella Shoha and Gayatri Spivak, but also Gloria Anzaldúa with Borderlands. And I think it's really important that Borderlands is now in its 4th edition, because these are foundational texts. And one thing I learn about feminism is that it really does become a theoretical ruined map, because often these texts are lost. And so it's really important that these works are still sort of kept in circulation. Each then patrol the unstable borderlands where feminist theory encounters anti-colonial thinking and where the politics of culture collides with the pervasiveness of imperial patriarchal reason that still lingers in the world. Revealed in the global scaling up of core values like female emancipation, women's rights, and gender equality, argues these foundational thinkers, is a first world feminism, one which has emerged as yet, they argue, as another Western epistemology prone to monolithic social, economic, and cultural formations within which and by which the world can be known. Scaled up, then, is a first world feminism exposed as yet another gesture of Western cultural imperialism, but also, adds Spivak, a way of colonized colonial thinking. So much so that the discourse of first world feminism translating into a solidarity in collective struggles against patriarchy, originating from the global north and traveling into the world, is rooted in assumptions of liberation and progress so deep that they never enter discussions of what defines emancipatory rights for women across the world, but instead remain what Spivak called another, quote, symptomatic of a colonialist benevolence, unquote. And this, I would argue, is actually etched into the politics of the TV format as another form of imperial neo-colonial enterprise in the world. Feminist TV criticism has, since its very inception in the 1970s, long been preoccupied with finding the women, with making visible, locating women in culture, within the TV text, as well as consumers of television. And we can see that work still carrying on within the DTEC project. Extending that ambition for a transnational TV culture, I turned to the locations of feminist cultural theories to help me make sense of the ruined geographical cartographies of how women are spatially located and materially produced across the uneven textural terrain of the bridge in global circulation. To make sense of the concrete situatedness of representing women in particular geographical, social, political television domains in specific places and at particular times, I'm particularly guided by the work of Susan Stanford Friedman. Her term locational feminism is particularly useful in this epistemological regard. Of locational feminism, she writes, that is simultaneously situated in a specific locale, global in scope and constantly in motion through space and time. Continuing, she writes, it is, quote, one that acknowledges that historically and graphically specific forms in which feminism emerges, takes roots, changes, travels, and translates in different spatial, temporal contexts. What appeals to me about Friedman's definition of locational feminism is its intervention with an encounter between past and present feminist theory and practice, and a temporality shaped profoundly by the local and the global at the same time. Thinking helps affect a spatial turn in feminist thinking from the temporality of feminist narratives about awakening and conscious raising, transformed into a spatial one, which summons feminist narratives of migratory movements, shifting borders and borderland locations. In a related move, I am interested in the specific geopolitics of how women are geographically located and concretely situated in different story worlds of the bridge. I am drawn to understanding the materiality of location and how spatial movements mediate and the geopolitics of female experience performed in bodies, and how this is done across the format, in turn leaving traces etched in the spatial and social worlds of the format itself. In wandering through this uneven, often ruined map of feminist theories, I suggest how locational feminism can help us make sense of the different and sometimes apparently contradictory dimensions of feminisms in the world. Inscribed in those underlying structural attitudes and referencing is, I would argue, not simply feminism as a discourse of contestation, but instead it makes visible the very paradox of feminism in the world. To further that thought, I'm going to share now my second audiovisual essay entitled Body Matters. This audio visual essay focuses on the autopsy scene, again taken from the exact same moment in each pilot where we discover that the body on the border is not one, but two women. So if we can look at the second audiovisual.
Yes, a second. Does it work?
Men det kommer att försvinna, du och Påsken. Dina papper har försvunnit.
I'm sorry, this is the third one. It's Body Matters. Body Matters, not Laurent Pia.
Du kan börja om. Här ute i lådan som finns ett kontantstopp. Men du måste bryta med din man ifall de inte avfann, ifall de inte pratar med honom.
¿Dónde estamos?
safe place.
Han är deras pappa. Vad säger jag till dem? De måste ju få träffa sin pappa.
Varför? Varför måste de det? För att få mer stryk. För att alltid vara rädda, för att inte råd med någonting, för att alla pengarna går till droger. Varför måste de träffa honom? Han kommer bara förstöra det där en gång till. Det är sådana som han gör, han förstör.
Jag känner inte ens mig.
No te muevas.
Varför gör du det här?
I left some food vouchers and a few other bits to help you get by. Until I find a more permanent solution for you. You should read this.
För att jag
I
kan.
want to know about the mentality of this country. For my records, I like to remember the people I helped.
We've actually sort of played them out of order. So could you play the other, because it was supposed to be Body Matters, that was Law and Fear. So could we play Body Matters?
Yeah, really sorry.
It's no worries.
Men det kommer att
Is
försvinna.
this the right one? No, right?
No, it's this. You're still playing Law and Fear. It's Body Matters.
Allora, Law and Fear.
Prova. Is this the right one? Sorry. Yeah, ok, quindi non ho sbagliato, ho cambiato. Ah sì.
Har du en dödsorsak?
Jag har en begåvad gissning. Men jag behöver lite mer tid. Preliminärt kan jag säga att hon dog någonstans för 6-8 timmar sedan.
Ja, stämmer bra. Och ringde hem vid 6:30 och hamnade på bron strax efter midnatt.
Men det är en annan sak. Det var därför jag ville att du skulle komma hit.
Vadå?
Titta på henne.
Tu m'excuseras, j'ai commencé sans toi. Tu veux jeter un œil? C'est un cas intéressant. Souviens-toi de ce que je t'ai appris.
Lèvres et oreilles légèrement cyanosées. Pictée hémorragique.
Inga likfläckar på ytterarmarna. Vilket stämmer bra överens med utblödningen.
Pas mal.
Betäck i ögonens bindehinnor.
Regarde les jambes.
Morning, Sonia. Okay.
Svullnad i ansiktet.
Cause of death's right here. Needle to the base of the spine and into the brain. Quick, easy.
Jag skulle säga att hon blev kvävd och kluven på småtten.
Good one. Gloves.
Och den andra halvan.
Spela med kollagen på.
Il y a 2 victimes.
You been by to see him?
Underkroppen är mycket blekare än överkroppen.
Not recently.
Mycket blekare.
Good. Don't give him the
Det
satisfaction.
inte förklaras med utblödning och kroppens läge på fyndplatsen.
Get your hands dirty, Hayes.
C'est quoi ça? C'est décoloration.
Perfect bisection.
Bruna hudmissfärgningar.
Keep going.
Je pensais que ça t'échapperait.
Förfrysning.
Check out the other half.
Känns annorlunda.
Depuis combien de temps?
Förfrysning.
Au moins 6 mois.
Inte förfrysning. Nedfrysning. Runt ett år skulle jag säga.
Tout ça a été prémédité.
Jag har aldrig sett något liknande. Jag vet inte vems det är. Men det där...
This one's a Hispanic female, late teens, early 20s.
Until I'm one with you. Until I'm one with you. My heart shall not pass through. Forsaken. Until I'm one with you. Our world is torn in two. Until I'm one with you, our love will be mistaken. Until I'm one with you. My death they will pursue. Until I'm one with you. My life life will be degraded.
Okay, thank you. So the body signals a deeper unsettlement of the local and the transnational. As soon as its dual identity is discovered, the body transcends its exclusive framing within national jurisdiction, yet at the same time it still inhabits a national space within an identity constituted inside the national. Within autonomy lesson, its obsession with the body, upon which acts of forensic analysis are performed as another form of editing, cutting into the sinew and cartilage of the body. What is uncovered is a geographical litany of social inequalities and gendered bias lived by women. It gives insight into the material conditions that structure women's lives in diverse locations daily and every day. This is about women subject to multiple patriarchies, named by Inderpal Growell and Karen Kaplan as scattered hegemonies. Part of the operations of transnational culture, they argue, scattered hegemonies include global economic structures, patriarchal nationalisms, authentic forms of tradition, local structures of domination, and legal judicial oppression on multiple levels. I find this concept of scattered hegemonies compelling for my feminist study of transnational TV culture, and I add it to the critical arsenal to demystify the material and symbolic conditions defining the place and experiences of women involved in trading TV formats and producing and acting in dramas, but also how women as image, as victim and agent materialize within a diverse range of representational practices subject to different patriarchal configurations dotted around the world. But at the same time, I also want to observe how the materiality of the text may explain why Saga Noran emerges as the most privileged heroine within global circulation. For she proves best able to conducting a forensic examination of the body. She's better able to make sense of the pathology of the corpse and the chemistry of its decay. This is in part because she is given longer within the public service media ecology of Northern Europe, as the duration of the sequence is slower, as to deliver its chilling revelation that the corpse is not one, but two different women. Social criticism written into the storytelling culture produces Saga Noran as a representational form fit for cultural travel within the restricted field of television TV production. In brisk contrast, US cutting rates mean Sonia Cross spends the least time with the body. She's told the cause of death and more focus instead on the precision of the crime. And because of the more obvious racial differences between the two victims, she doesn't need to spend any time pondering the shades of a paler corpse. Still, Cross appears to be navigating a different kind of televisual storytelling ecology than Noran or Wasserman. This is the politics of US editing, which dispatches narrative information with relative efficiency, but it also doesn't quite afford this kind of new representational female agency, detached and in exile within herself, the same space to perform, in part because she operates within a different, more commercial inflected TV cultural context. Privileged within its own terms, but not positioned within the same structure of the specific capital of recognition occupied by Noran, and to a lesser extent Wasserman. Still, those bodies, still one of those bodies which get left behind. Those bodies are now the bodies which are subject to the final audiovisual essay, which you will also saw, Law and Fear. Rescuing vulnerable women by men with ambiguous motives who ferry them away from spaces of danger where social, political and legal institutions fail to protect them, is repeated across each iteration. The shift across borders of countries of the frame reshapes the intimate terrorism of women at the border before our very eyes. Whereas in the Swedish-Danish version, this is a wholly domestic affair, with the failure of the state to support a victim of domestic abuse as much a crime as the body on the border. But something else happens and comes into view when the format starts to travel. But once it does, this character translates into a woman who cannot call on the health and economic resources of a nation state because they come from outside. As migrants, refugees, women fleeing danger elsewhere, these women are enmeshed in the politics of the border. They don't speak the language, quite literally in the case of Veronique, the undocumented Colombian migrant in the tunnel, who literally remains silent. Or as illegal immigrants, they can't speak because of fear of deportation. These then are the unsolved crimes, the true crimes of the format. So in conclusion then, I want to say a few words about this practice-led research as a form of material thinking for transnational TV studies, as I address the question of how to find value in the geopolitics of these female representations at a border. The shock of the bodies splitting, the discovery of the two victims, the awakening to multiple oppressions and shared silences in intimate terror, translate for me into the epiphany of research, of seeing the world differently, offering a different awareness of the world. With the audiovisual essay, what comes into view for me at least is the dynamics of the transnational, the politics of its value, commercial, creative, ideological. It is a way of researching that allows me to expand the lens to make visible, but in looking with the magnifying glass through the very material process of the making, of the handling of the digital text. Dealing with text as effect helps me to shade my thinking. Thinking about the cultural geopolitics and theorizing of women and women's bodies across borders differently allows us to see inconsistencies, discontinuities, anomalies, while at the same time to see what's shared. It reveals simultaneously what Dana Haraway calls situated knowledge, while at the same time what Shoha calls relational feminism. It gives us a sense of that paradox of feminism within our continuing age of troubled emancipation, how a feminism advances in the world, what progress might look like, but also who gets left behind within that idea. And one model of feminism of advancement may be of absolutely no use to another woman struggling with different forms of structural inequalities. In what effects reveals, in what the effect of this audiovisual also reveals is the violence within the very representational forms, the violence of editing women out of the story, cutting down their textual existence. Veronica, for example, appears only in the first episode, and Veronique in the tunnel lasts only 3 episodes. Bringing the different crime scenes from across the globe, situated within specific TV ecologies and at different times, together within the transnational composite, pushes the comparative impulse out of orbit to reveal instead the comparative operations of the TV format as palimpsest, that game of citations, adaptations and remakes I spoke about earlier. In that context, for me, the audiovisual essay emerges as a form of pentimento to reveal changes done to the underdrawings of the format, the visible layers and the layering of TV forms and cultures laid over each other, differing from the public service original. But this layering also brings me to the other issue of time and durational experience. Firstly, the audiovisual in many ways guards against the failure to recall, a protest against forgetting those often overlooked stories, those slight stories which all too often get lost, obscured and silenced in those bigger narrative arcs. It challenges also our misrememberings and our perceptions of the text, what we imagine to have happened, but really it didn't quite happen as we imagined. It helps with the thick description, with the time and space to think about the representational juxtapositions, it gives us time to think of how one story weaves with another, not only internally in the series, but across the format. The audiovisual materiality adds further, I would argue, to the memory of television, an exercise of memory, the expression of it. In many ways, in revisiting these audiovisual essays made in 2018, now in 2021, they themselves have become timepieces of television in themselves. Time capsules even in time since 2011, new borders have been erected, such as the border controls over the Orenston Bridge in response to the European migrant crisis of 2015. And since 2013, older borders have been reimagined with the tunnel made before Brexit and the borders repoliticized with the US-Mexican, the bridge made before the Trump years and the politics of its wall. Finally, there is, and I always say this, a misappropriation of the televisual text, a ruination that I'm undertaking, a sense of me controlling the story that moves and flows from one territory to another, to slow it down for the purpose of sustained contemplation and interrogation, as a way to make sense of it. But in that slowing down, allowing for slow thinking, am I not performing the very act of cultural consecration that I was speaking? Is this audio-visual essay yet another performance of legitimization within the transnational television value chain? In stitching together the textual scraps of my own materialist feminist intervention allows me also to perform my own positionality, like the disconnected TV heroine who stands at the center of the project, a way, no doubt, to elevate my own position as a TV feminist scholar in culture. Still, in this intimacy with the text, it teaches me to stand within cultures, outside of them, outside of culture, of language, and within production cultures. The national never disappears, rather it is where the local and the transnational fields intersect, and it is where a renewed materiality of feminist thinking emerges. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you so much. Federico, just give me, but I think we need to finish very, very soon at no later than 5 o'clock. So we actually don't have too much time for questions. So I'd like to actually offer it to the people who have asked questions during the talk. Federico, I can't see the questions. So in case somebody has asked the question, otherwise I'm happy to ask. I can't hear you, Federico. Okay, I think I might just ask a question then, Janet.
Excuse me, I was being muted by someone else. So I was saying if anyone in the audience wants to ask a question, they should raise hands so we can make them speak and be seen. But of course, if Pia you want to ask a question in the meanwhile.
While people just, yeah. Could you, like you said, you didn't have time to go into the other 3 adaptations, the past, the Singaporean Malay one and the Russian Estonian one. Could you elaborate a little bit on how those fit in with your arguments?
Yeah, well, I was actually hoping to do some more audiovisual essays. I didn't particular because obviously all those adaptations repeat the same moments in the pilot. But it is really interesting to see, which territory does what with it. And I think obviously one of the most enlightening is what the German-Austrian version does with it, which is to replace the divided female body, because clearly the trauma is too much, with a complete male. And the ruination of that body is a Bulgarian people traveller holding the fake ID of a child who died, but has obviously been who's stolen that ID because this person has got a fake ID card from a Syrian refugee. So it's really interesting to sort of see how that body in the border sort of speaks of the sort of geopolitics, if you like, over the last 10 years, and also sees the emergence of new territories, particularly with the Singapore Malay version. And because what is really interesting is to see, and this is something that we've spoken about ourselves, Pia, is how the bridge has become this quite privileged television bit of property, and how it is used often by independent production companies, often by new platforms to launch something. This has happened with Discussant. It was the second original for Sky Deutschland, and in the Singapore Malay version, it allowed HBO to move into a territory and launch a platform view. HBO were bankrolling it, they weren't making it, but here is a very valuable piece of property which is used to announce a new initiative. So I think that is also, it's really interesting to sort of see how the show has been used, and in terms of the Estonian Russian version, which I'm making my way through right at this moment, again, this is being used as a very important, well, it was used as a very important piece of property to launch a new channel's identity. So I wanted to kind of play with those ideas a little bit more, but I'm also interested to see what happens to that sort of geopolitics of the female body.
Yeah, so you came back a couple of times, you said you hinted to the fact that the original was public service, but the others had nothing to do with public service, and that could explain some of the differences. Could you elaborate a little bit on that, or is it, how significant is it that the original is from a public broadcaster? Is it that, or is it that it's Nordic, or is it a mix?
Yeah, I think what it does is it helps with this issue around legitimacy, because